Greetings, everybody. Robert Phoenix back here for the Sunday night. And probably gonna see who shows up tonight. I put the notice over on YouTube. I'm sorry, on Facebook, and this is a new format here with YouTube. It's you don't even have to like go in and program anything. You just start the live stream and then you end it when it. Hi, Suze. Nice to see you. You just end it at some point, right? So it's kind of interesting. I want to see how I look on OBS, but the stream looks pretty high quality tonight, if I do say so myself. I'll go back over on the OBS side. How's that happening? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, how is everybody? So, a lot of Sagittarius out there in the world right now. Holy smokes. We've got a new moon tomorrow. It peaks. The new moon peaks tomorrow. And we have Sun in Sag, we have Mercury in Sag, we have Jupiter in Sag. No, we don't have Jupiter in Sag. Let's just get this up here. Venus. Here we go. Chart of the moment. We're going to be looking at this thing. Here we go. There's people showing up. Hi, everybody. Here's Judy. Hi. Hi, Madeline. Okay, so the chart of the moment. That is for December 4th. It's not what we want. Here it is. So the chart of the moment, we have Saturn, Sun, Moon, Venus, Mercury, all in the sign of Sagittarius. Wow. It's a lot of Sagittarius going on. It's a lot of intensity, let me tell you. It's all piled up in my first house. Yeah, very interesting. I wouldn't mind getting rid of Saturn, but you know, Saturn is what it is, and it's getting ready to move on into my second house, and it should be an interesting journey. My second Saturn return. It's really interesting. You know, you would think that with all these planets in Sagittarian quarterbacks would do really well today in the NFL, and I know of two off the top of my head: Phillip Rivers and Russell Wilson. And Rivers was terrible, and Wilson had one of the worst games of his career. So maybe it was too much Sagittarius. You know, maybe there was like a level of like overkill or something like that. That their sun signs were that they were just getting way too much oversaturation of Sagittarius. Another strange day in the NFL, of course. It wouldn't be requisite without a controversial call against, this time, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it just feels like the NFL is just kind of unraveling at the seams. And it's been going that way really for more than the last 2 years. And what's really fascinating about the NFL is the players are very concerned about their health. And what happens, or what I've seen, is I've seen players put helmet-to-helmet hits on other players all the time. And I think something just happens when these guys get, you know, wound up. And there's a guy named Thomas Davis who's like this great guy. He's always like kind of a man of the year kind of guy. And he unleashed on a player today. And he automatically felt some level of remorse. But it's amazing how the lack of self-restraint is evident even when they have their own self-interest at heart, I suppose. Well, we're going to look at a lot tonight, and we're going to try to untangle the Sagittarius, all the Sagittarian influence. And of course, Mercury is retrograde. How's everybody doing their Mercury retrogrades? Man, this has been, I mean, I haven't had anything major malfunction, but, well, that's not really true. But I know a lot of people that are going through retrograde hell. And what's interesting is, this started on the 29th degree of Sagittarius. So, of course, we're going to get a lot of the sort of the Me Too stuff that was already in the pipeline. But a recent incident occurred, which I thought was quite interesting. It was almost like a double Mercury in Sagittarius retrograde reversal. So the story is there's a guy who's a sportscaster at ESPN. His name is John Buccigross. And he was having, for all intents and purposes, a light affair with an intern. And she was there for 2 years. She was part of a diversity program. And what happened was that she eventually went to the Boston Globe with these texts that they were sharing between them. And at no time did John Buccigross ever show his anatomy, his junk. I mean, it never came up. There was nothing, anything rude or salacious. In fact, she was asking him when could she see him again? Could they go out to eat? I mean, these were all it was a two-way conversation. But the Boston Globe thought that it was socially important to print her charges against Buccigross and ESPN, and she said that she felt unfairly terminated due to the fact that she had gone to the people at ESPN, the management of ESPN, and told them about what had happened. Well, so the texts came out, and they're completely benign. In fact, he calls her doll face. So what's happened here is that we went into the past with a Mercury retrograde situation. That was already happening. That wave was already happening. People have been coming out of the past to identify their accusers. And so, but what happened was that she was part of the wave, but then it doubled back on itself because ESPN said they had thoroughly investigated the entire process and the relationship between Buccigross and the intern. Or she wasn't even an intern. She was getting paid. She was part of a diversity program. So they investigated everything. And what happened was that they said, okay, he's fine. He's going to stay on the air. And they stood by. So basically what we had is we had a person who was using this momentum in this moment in time. And then it was published via newspaper. Remember, Sagittarius rules publishing in newspapers. So keep that in mind. And once that happened, it became inverted because there was nothing there. There was nothing there. And then now we have another spin of the news cycle where commentators are saying, well, you have to understand the nature of the protest. But what's really fascinating here is that what nobody's talking about is the truth. And well, they're trying to bring the truth forward, but the truth right now is an elusive ghost in a lot of ways. So we have all these planets in Sagittarius, and they're all quite fiery and bold. In fact, the moon is on my Jupiter. Well, will be tomorrow. So hopefully my emotional life will expand a bit. But it's a fascinating kind of exercise. And another one that's coming up is what's going to be happening with Roy Moore in Alabama. And Roy Moore has not conceded. Again, there are a lot of fundamentally kind of wrong things about Roy Moore. But one of the things that I've loved about it is he's been a disruptor. He's an Aquarius. We've talked about that on the show. But now they're saying that there are about 18,000 military votes that are going to come in. He has not conceded, by the way. So here we have a judgment that's been rendered, i.e. Doug Jones is the winner. This happened during a Mercury retrograde. And now there's a very strong possibility that when these votes come back, there could be a reversal of the election results. So how is that going to play out? That's going to be wild in a lot of ways, right? I mean, what happens if there is a reversal? What's the left going to do, and what's the right going to do? And the whole thing is totally nuts. There's Ted. Hello, Ted. Hi, Anna. How are you? Thank you for joining and welcome to the proceedings tonight. So here we are with all this Sag. So what can you do? How do you capitalize on it? There's Christine. Hi, Christine. How do you capitalize on all this Sag? Well, I think there's, we talk about good cheer, right? Good cheer. And this is the season of good cheer. And why? Because it's Sagittarius. Have you ever seen Santa Claus? I mean, Santa Claus is such a Sagittarian character, right? I mean, Sagittarius is very Falstaffian and ho, and he's jolly and ribald, and Santa's taken a few hits, right, on the winter flask and the grog as he's flying around. So Santa is, and you just look at him and he's, of course he's a creation of Coca-Cola, but still nonetheless, he looks like he's a total Sagittarian character. Because we think of Sagittarius, what do we think? We think of larger than life and, and big and, kind of bold. And, has anybody ever met a meek Sagittarius? I've never met a meek Sagittarius. And even though they may be more reserved, there's a side to them that is clearly not meek. So meek and Sagittarius don't go hand in hand. Another thing Santa Claus has in common with Sagittarius is he travels. Sagittarius is an expansive sign and loves to travel. And what does Santa Claus do? He flies all over the place. So here we go. There's another Sagittarian element to Sagittarius. And he's generous, too. Sagittarians tend to be really generous people. If you've ever spent time around Sages, they're pretty generous folks, right? So anyway, Santa Claus is the embodiment of Sagittarius. I wonder if he drinks 12 Cokes a day. That was funny. I made a thing about the 12 Diet Cokes that Trump drinks every day. And a couple of people got offended by it. It was interesting. It's like, I drink whatever I want. I eat what I love, John. It's like, fine. I just don't think 12 Diet Cokes a day, you can do whatever you want. I just don't think 12 Diet Cokes a day are going to, help your performance. Unless you're like a yogi. Wouldn't that be like a yogi thing to do? Do you remember when the Beatles brought LSD to the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi? And they gave him like a really substantial dose and didn't affect him. Like he was just smiling. They should do the same thing with a yogi in India. Bring him like 12 Diet Cokes and see what he does. See if he passes the Diet Coke test. So anyway, we have all this Sagittarius, and another thing today, comes out that Jerry Richardson, who owns the Carolina Panthers, is now being investigated for improper, solicitation of a female employee, and he just said, "Screw it, I'm putting the team up for sale." That's it. He's putting the team up for sale. He's done. This is the owner of a national football. So this is, it's not just Harvey Weinstein. This stuff is, it's prevalent everywhere. And I put a post up on Facebook today about how this whole process is creating a higher level of distrust amongst people, especially between the sexes. But it was met with a lot of different replies. Some people were really, they got it. Other people saw it from a different angle and, sparked a whole lot of dialogue. So there we are with the Mercury, and it's not over yet. We've got a few more days. We got to go take this all the way basically through Christmas. And then we've got to go through the shadow of Mercury retrograde again. And finally, we move through this thing and Mercury gets back on track in January. But let's see. Let's check in with the chat room. You guys have any Mercury retrograde experiences you want to share here? Let's see. Aylin says, kicking my ass. And Ted says, going to be fantastic. So if you, hi, Judy. If you guys have any Mercury retrograde experiences you want to type in there, go for it. Just let me know. I'll bring it up. So what else is happening in the chart of the moment? Should I put it up there? Let's take a look at the chart of the moment. Let's make this thing official so you guys know. Let's see, heavy energy. Boy, there is so much heavy energy right now. It's very intense. maybe this conjunction and this energy that's connected to the galactic center is making everything more intense, because certainly we are living right now through a very, very stressful period. Let's look at the chart of the moment. Let's bring it on up here so we can have a peek at it. And let's see, there's Asaruladu Maskin. Hi, welcome. Okay, so let's look at the chart of the moment. I feel like queuing up Asia. It was the chart of the moment. Remember the 80s? God, I never thought I'd miss the 80s, but man, they're looking pretty good right about now. All right, let's get into this. This is a new frontier, boys and girls. Doesn't it feel good? Okay, here we go. Chart moment now. All right, let's see. Jazz. Robert Mitchum played jazz saxophone. He was a pretty good one, apparently. Pretty good jazz sax player. Only played it on Christmas Eve, though. Moment 2017, according to his daughter. Okay, let's get back to OBS. All right, moment 2017. Here we go. Boom. All right. Here's the beast. Right here is what we're looking at. It's the current conditions. These are your current astrological conditions for tonight, December 17th, 2017. I'll tell you another really interesting Mercury retrograde moment. I left my cell phone home for about a day. Man, it was great. I loved it. I left it at home. I turned it off. It was so freaking peaceful. And I did something yesterday that I haven't done in a very long time. I read the newspaper. And because it was at the diner that I go to, the guy had left it there, so I'm reading the newspaper, and I noticed that they got the date of the newspaper wrong. It was a Saturday paper, and it said December 17th, 2017. And even the guy sitting next to me looked at it. We both laughed. So even the Austin Statesman got in on the Mercury retrograde game. All right. So remember, this is just right here, right now. This is where the stars are. And look at that. Look at that convoy of planets in Sagittarius. How about that? And Saturn is leading the pack. So everything has to go through Saturn, right? Saturn is, Saturn is the lead dog here, and it's going very slowly. Saturn doesn't move very quickly, but it's very methodical. So in order to get to all these planets in Sagittarius, you've got to pass through Saturn. You've got to pass through that gateway, and it's not that easy. Of course, the planets can move beyond Saturn pretty quickly. Certainly, the Sun will, but the Sun and Saturn are they're gonna be conjunct on the 22nd on the solstice. That's going to be pretty intense. I mean, I've talked about that 2 weeks ago. We talked about it again tonight. I mean, this is the birth of the Capricorn age for the next 3 years in a pretty significant fashion. This welcome Baphomet. You know who else? You know who else is representative of Capricorn? Well, I'll show you. I'll give you a physical. I'll give you a visual. Okay, let me go online here, and I'll give you a visual. Give me 1 sec here. We're going to fire this thing up. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Here we go. Well, you'll see it. Let's put it that way. All right, let's go on over to OBS. Let's pop this one in here. You guys get a kick out of this. Here we go. Here's another image of it's Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam, and of course we have the top portion of Baphomet. You see the little resemblance there? We just put a top hat on Baphomet. See, there's no coincidences. Uncle Sam is not, you know, I mean, clearly Baphomet is a goat head. And, you know, there's an invocation of Baphomet with the government and Capricorn and the 10th house and all that it entails. So wouldn't it make sense that Uncle Sam would have that same kind of Capricornian Baphometric image? It's like you guys might like that. Just a little visual taste there. Yeah, we want to remove that. Okay, so let's go back to the chart of the moment. So on the solstice, Sun and Saturn are going to pop together. Not really pop. They're going to slide into place. And I feel like that there is a large amount of ritualistic energy around this Sun-Saturn conjunction on New Year's Eve. I'm sorry, on the solstice. So, you know, there are obviously groups of people that love to indulge in the energy of the rituals at the turning of the seasons. And this is going to be a clear indicator and a clear marker that something really powerful on an energetic level is going to be there for, you know, the sort of the indulging and the taking in a lot of ways. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens on the solstice and the days after, and even for really the next 3 years, because that's how long Saturn, of course, is going to be in Capricorn. It's a pretty momentous time. The Sun-Saturn conjunction hasn't happened for ages. I've gone back and I've looked and I've looked and I've looked, and I haven't been able to find one in recent memory. And there's who is it? Ayala Chan over on Facebook, and Ayala's pretty great. If you don't follow her, you should. She's brilliant. Ayala Chan basically said it was like a 0.7280% chance of the two actually conjuncting on the solstice. So this is a pretty rare celestial event and a pretty rare astrological event. So hang on to your hats. It's going to get pretty intense, I think, in 2018. And it's just, I mean, it's just about, I mean, I feel like it's going to be about overreach in a lot of ways. And we can already see this. And it's not just on a federal level. It'll be on a state level. It'll be on a local level. One of the bits and pieces of information coming out of California right now is they're very close to enacting a mileage tax. Now, some people think that's great. You know, some people think, well, we don't have to drive that much. It's bad for the environment, so on and so on and so on. And I'm sure that, you know, a really good case can be made for it. You know, I'm the type of person that I grew up in a different time, and, you know, we were programmed to have cars and drive and be free. And I kind of like that. I kind of like to be able to get my car and go and not have to pay a tax every mile or two. See, this is the type of overreach that we're beginning to talk about here. And it's not just the United States. I mean, we're going to see this in other countries as well. The CDC now, which is a total Capricornian industry, you know, the CDC plays both sides of they play both sides of the ledger sheet. You know, they're on the one hand, they're a business. I mean, the CDC makes huge amounts of money. I mean, on the other hand, they work for the government because they make their business money through research. So the CDC it's kind of like the post office, only makes a hell of a lot more money. Anyway, they're talking about outlying words like fetus. I mean, we're in a really, really bizarre time. So this overreach won't be just laws that'll be enacted on a state, local, even and federal level, but it's also the type of discourse that we're going to have. And even if Saturn's in Sagittarius, I mean, I think we can look at right now, look at all those planets that just want to break out right behind it and want to be free, right? It's like, man, let's get out of here. You know, it's kind of like driving down the road and you get one of those, you know, they're moving a house. They're moving one of those prefab houses, and you're on a 1-lane highway. I mean, that's what Saturn is right now. So, I mean, we can look at this from a momentary position. And tomorrow, the moon's going to move up a little bit. It's still going to be there. It's going to be conjuncting the sun. It will move past Saturn. That's the one thing that's going to happen. But that Moon-Saturn conjunction, that's not a walk in the park. I mean, those are hard emotional truths that are going to be expressed by people. And Sagittarius can be, Sagittarius, it's not the warmest sign in a lot of ways. I mean, it can be warm. It's warm in kind of how do I say this? A religious sense, like a sense of, zeal. It's got zeal. When it talks about God, Sagittarius embraces God and embraces, the Holy Spirit and, the ninth house stuff, right? When it's up in the ninth house, Sagittarius heats up and it gets warm. That's where the heat comes from. And the Spirit of God shared amongst one. I mean, that's very Sagittarian. You get fired up with that, right? But outside of that, it's not always a warm sign. Sagittarius can cut like a blowtorch. So when we get the Moon-Saturn conjunction, it's going to be, it's going to be real honest, very raw, and pretty intense, I think, over the course of the next, 36 hours. Okay. And then all the other planets, the Sun and Mercury and Venus, well, Mercury's going backwards, but there's a sense, I'm just using this as kind of a visual, and if Saturn is kind of the blockade, no matter what sign it's in, all these other planets are trying to, amass some energy and move through this, and they will, but it won't be easy. Just think, a year from now, Jupiter in Sagittarius. It'll be very, very different time on the way. Speaking of Jupiter, it's on the ascendant, and it's in Scorpio, and then there's Mars in the 12th house, which we know is the house of hidden enemies. This Mars is going to be going through both Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton's house, 12th house. And, Hillary Clinton has had that walking boot on now for almost 2 months. So there are people who are, they're convinced that she's got an ankle bracelet on and that she's under some form of arrest. I don't know, but 2 months for a boot. I mean, maybe she just really completely tenderized her foot. But then again, maybe something else is going on. And then you've got John McCain who can't figure out what foot the boot goes on. That's just totally bizarre. Anyway, so this is going to be an interesting time with Mars and Hillary Clinton's 12th house. Is something going to go down, or are we going to just continue to be a part of the dog and pony show that has been going on with Hillary and Bush and the FBI? I mean, the whole thing is just mind blowing. And it's in fact, we're being flooded with so much information that we can barely keep track of it. It's just, it's Mueller. It's this guy who was the assistant director for the FBI, Fusion GPS. I mean, all this stuff. And it's almost like it's gotten to this point where people are just completely overwhelmed and you're trying to keep score at home. And it's almost impossible to keep score at home with the whole thing. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's part of the strategy around all this, is that they don't really want you to be able to sift through all the various and sordid details. Excuse me. But it's going to be interesting to see how Mars plays out in Hillary Clinton's chart. Is somebody going to come forward and throw her under the bus? It's quite possible. I mean, that's the nature of Mars in the 12th house. And then there's Jupiter there. And in this moment, Jupiter is quite expansive in Scorpio and is going to be expanding further into Scorpio until we get to, I think it's February, if I'm not mistaken, where it goes retrograde. I think it's up to around 21. Let's look at it. Let's stop being speculative. Let's find out the skinny with Jupiter. Here we go. We're going to look at the ephemeris here. Going to get into 2018, 2118. You know what that is? That's 20. What is 20? 20 is the aeon in the major arcana. It is the end of one age and the beginning of another. It is the birth. It is the birth of Baphomet with the Saturn-Sun conjunction. All right, here we go. All righty. Jupiter. Let's see. Good old Jupiter. Good old Jupy. Okay, so Jupiter goes retrograde in March, on the 9th of March at 23 degrees. So it gets up pretty quickly, 23 degrees, and it does. And Jupiter zips backwards really quickly, and it goes pretty far too. So that's the 9th of March, and then we have it for 6 months, right? Because it goes retrograde for 6 months. And what do we got here? Let's see. Yeah, it's not quite 6. Here we go. It's going to be, March. Hold on. We got March is 3, July 7. So it's 4 months. It'll be retrograde for 4 months, and it goes direct on July 11th at 13 degrees. So it goes all the way back to 13 degrees, and it's going to retrograde 10 degrees. Well, 10 degrees over 4 months. That's not too rapid, is it? It's going to be interesting to see what happens during that Jupiter retrograde. And I wonder, because this Jupiter in Scorpio really expanded into that whole dark, shadowy kind of underworld, the underbelly of sexuality, and it started with a bang with Weinstein, right? People think that Weinstein was offered up as some kind of a sacrifice, and there's really interesting. There's theories on two sides about that sacrifice with Weinstein. Remember, he's born 29 degrees Pisces. He's at the end of the zodiac. It is like at 29 degrees, there's nothing left, right? He in a lot of ways, it's funny. I think he's born on the same day as Baron Trump, and that was the 20. Let's see, I think it was Rockefeller, and Baron Trump born 29. I think he's 29 Pisces, and Rockefeller died on 29 Pisces. So the 29 Pisces is a very interesting degree because it's fragmenting, and the entire zodiacal year is ending. The entire cycle is ending. There's this complete dissolution, and so there are two theories to this whole Weinstein being a sacrifice. So there are people who believe that Weinstein is being offered up as a sacrifice so they can basically run the table and continue to have this domino effect that eventually leads to Donald Trump. That's one verse. So the left decided to offer up one of its own as part of the sacrifice. There's another version of the sacrifice where it's actually part of a Judaical belief that Harvey Weinstein becomes this sacrifice for the community and is part of this quickening of the Messiah, believe it or not. So there's these two versions of Weinstein, the sacrifice, which is interesting. And we talk about sacrifice with Pisces and the sign of Pisces. So it all started with him at 29 Pisces, or at least it started with his 29 Pisces sun. And it was almost to the day when Jupiter went into Scorpio. And since then, it hasn't been about really expanding into interesting, deep, profound, mesmeric and magnetic sex. It hasn't been about that. It's been about dredging up, expanding and dredging, expanding and dredging. I hope by the time this is over, we're having a discussion about Kundalini, that we've blown out the pipes here with all this crap, so we can get into some interesting components with Jupiter in Scorpio. Now, I believe Jupiter in Scorpio, if I'm not mistaken, is in its fall. So let's just do a quickie on that. It's detriment. Jupiter in Scorpio is in its detriment, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to find this out. Let's see. Hold on a second. Yeah. So let's see what we got here. Just want to make sure. So Jupiter's in its detriment in Gemini, and its fall is in Capricorn. And let's see, exalted in Cancer, rulership Sag, detriment Gemini, and Virgo and fall in Capricorn. All right, okay. So in Scorpio, let me just see here. Moon in Taurus, Moon is exaltation in Taurus. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Venus exalted in Pisces. Okay. Mars, exaltation, rulership in Aries and Scorpio. Okay, so Jupiter is going to be neutral. It's not going to be in detriment and fall. So even though it's neutral, it's still expanding through the intensity and the darkness and the dark underbelly of it all. Okay. And it's right there on the ascendant of the chart of the moment. So we're having a discussion about it at the very least. There's actually some really good energy in this chart. I mean, in spite of all that Sagittarian clusterfuck, there's a lot of good energy here. The challenging bit, I think, is the Mercury, Venus, Neptune square, which on a Sunday night is generally not going to be that big of a deal. And Mercury's starting to move. Well, Mercury's moving backwards. So we're going to have more of that Mercury, Neptune square as over the course of the next couple of days. That's a tricky square because, well, first of all, anytime you get into Mercury Neptune squares, you get into things like prevarication and bending the truth and omission, and it's not the greatest aspect for Mercury, to be honest. Anytime you get into squares with Neptune, we've talked about this, they're challenging. But retrograde, it's putting a whole other spin on it. So it might be good. I mean, this is one of those examples where Mercury retrograde might actually be beneficial, so you can clear things up from the past that were misunderstandings. So that's over the course of the next couple of days. But I'm not sure it's great to initiate with a Mercury retrograde. I think it's probably better to respond versus initiate. So if you're looking for any kind of strategic function with a Mercury retrograde, I would say respond versus initiate. I went through this. I had this theory for a while about Mercury retrogrades. I'm not sure it really panned out, but I thought, well, what happens if you go to the other sign, right? Maybe the Mercury retrograde is a call to get out of that sign that it's in and then reverts or redirect to the opposite sign, which is Gemini. And I threw that out to one of my students one time, and I was just, tossing it about, and we were thinking about, like, how would that look? How would it work? And she tried it for a week. She said it was terrible. So I don't know. I mean, maybe you're feeling adventurous and you want to deal with Mercury retrograde by going through Gemini, which is very, very different than Sagittarius. Gemini's got all the component parts, and Sagittarius is big picture, big picture, big picture, big picture. So maybe you want to break things down, make them bite-sized. That might actually work, in terms of making lists, and because sometimes with that Mercury in Sag, it's just so big, get lost in kind of the big picture and lose track of the details. So maybe you want to write notes to yourself with this Mercury retrograde. Well, other than that, the energy's pretty good. I mean, lots of flow here with Uranus. I mean, this could be a very enthusiastic time. Like if you're feeling good in your life and you have some good momentum, this could be a really tremendous time with trining Uranus, especially if you're one of the fire signs. You've got some Leo playing around in there. or maybe you're one of the well, mutable really wouldn't work, but one of the other cardinal signs, like Libra, would be interesting for sure, because we'd have sextiles. You'd still be dealing with that opposition with Uranus, and even Aquarius. Aquarius would be, so if you have planets in Aquarius right now, you're going to get over the course of the next, let's see, where are we? From the next 48 hours to the next couple of weeks with Venus and even Mercury in Sagittarius, you're going to get sextiling from Sag and sextiling off into Uranus. So I'm going to go on record and say of all the signs over the course of the next 10 days to 10 to 14 days that Aquarius, even though they've got to go through the South Node, is probably sitting pretty. Although they're going to deal with some of this square energy too, right? With Jupiter and Mars, especially Mars. That Mars in Scorpio, that'll take Aquarians out of their ivory tower. It'll take them out of their headspace. So there's the chart of the moment. It's not that complex. It is not that complex. Major leaps in reasoning with that trine to Uranus. I should jump all over that. Well, why don't we do this? I've got some charts that I'm going to bring out, and I'm going to break down some of these. A couple of them are really interesting. Why don't I do that now? Let me. These are birthdays that are happening over the next couple of days, and one is an event chart, which I've just kind of put it together. So we're going to look at it together and see if we can maybe make this a group experience. All right. So let's take this out of here. Let's get rid of image 3. Let's get rid of that. Okay. So let's do a couple celeb charts here. Here we go. These are going to be fun. Okay. You guys can get into these. Let's see what we got. My father had Jupiter in Scorpio. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Keith chart. So you know who this is. Keith Richards, right? Okay, well, we're going to look at Keith Richards' chart, but we're also going to look at this chart. There we go. Mick Jagger, that's right. So why did I bring, well, first of all, Keith Richards is a Sagittarius, correct? Okay, he's a Sagittarius and born December 18th, and Jagger is born July 26th. Okay, so I'm going to put this up over here on my computer so I can see a little bit better. All right, so what do we see with Keith Richards' chart? Well, first of all, he's got Sun in Sagittarius. He's a Scorpio rising. Does that does that strike you as odd? No. I mean, Keith Richards is, he's performed as a vampire for most of his career, right? I mean, you know the story about Keith Richards. He was shooting dope, and he couldn't come into the United States unless he passed a blood test. And he had his entire body drained of blood, and had a complete transfusion. And he took the blood test, and he passed it with flying colors. He said he never felt better in his life. Yeah, I bet the Rolling Stones are definitely into blood on a lot of different levels. So that Keith fits our Scorpio rising profile. He's also got, check this out. He's got Pluto, and he's got the true node in Leo at 6 and 7 degrees. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's bring up Mick Jagger's chart. Now remember, Jagger and Richards are called what? They're called the Glimmer Twins or the Glamour Twins, depending upon what album you look at. So where is Mick Jagger's sun? It's at 2 degrees, what? Leo. So his sun is just 5 degrees off Keith Richards' true node. His Jupiter is at 5 degrees Leo, also right on Keith Richards' true node. And his Mercury is at 10 degrees Leo, which puts it right on top of Keith Richards' moon. So we've got 4 of Mick Jagger's Leo planets. Well, 3 planets plus an aspect. They didn't include Pluto because they're both born under Pluto and Leo. And they're conjuncting Keith Richards' true node. Now, Keith Richards doesn't have the same kind of alignment, but what he does have is he's got a moon at 7 degrees Virgo conjuncting Mick Jagger's Venus at 13 degrees Virgo. So we have connections, interstitial connections all over the place with these two guys. And Richards is he's 25 Sag, and Jagger's an early Leo. So they're not going to have the sun trine, but they have conjunctions. And of course, Keith Richards and Jagger, the guy that started the Rolling Stones was Brian Jones. And Keith Richards and Brian Jones were pals, and Jagger was kind of the hired gun and the odd guy out. And eventually what happens is that he gets forced out of the group psychologically, psychically, and then Jagger takes his best friend from him, Keith Richards. But you could see that they were almost kind of fated to work together with the conjunction of all of Jagger's planets, Leo planets around his true node. So Keith Richards has this creative destiny. Whatever you think of the Stones, whether you like them or not, whether you dig their music, whether you think they're false idols or demons. Trust me, a lot of people do. There's scary stories about the Stones living in Los Angeles. Let's just leave it at that. So we have over Keith Richards' 7th house, Mars-Uranus conjunction. That's in partnership. That's working one-on-one with another person. In the sign of Gemini, well, go to the other side of the chart. And what is Mick Jagger? He's a Gemini rising. And that puts Keith Richards, Mars, and Uranus right in this 1st house. So here we go again. We have the clustering effect of the conjunctions. Mars, Uranus, Saturn, ascendant. I mean, how could these guys not be connected? Am I right? Also, there's some opposition going on here. Keith Richards has 11. He's got his Venus in Scorpio at 11 degrees, opposing Mick Jagger's Mars at 12 degrees. So not only do they have conjunctions in both of their charts, but they also have key opposition. Now that's a fixed opposition. And if they didn't have all the other stuff that was connecting them, I don't necessarily think that they'd be able to hang out as much with that Venus-Mars opposition. Now Jagger's got the moon in Gemini, moon in Taurus, and Uranus in Taurus, and Mars in the 12th house. Jagger's 12th house is kind of shifty in some ways. He's got the Uranus square to Venus. I think he's going out with, a 26-year-old now. I think he's got her pregnant, if I'm not mistaken. That Mars is a bit dark, right? He's got a Mars square Pluto and a Mars square Neptune. There was a time when the Stones had to leave England because the English were hammering them with taxes, and they didn't like it. They didn't like being hammered with taxes. So Keith Richards, what does he do? This is a very 9th house kind of deal. Keith Richards goes to France and he sets up a chateau. Gets a chateau in the south of France. And it's right there. Look at his 9th house. His 9th house, which represents foreign travel in other countries, is loaded up there. Of course, the French, ruled by Leo, loved him. So here we have the moon on the midheaven, and so they set up a, he's the guy that set up a home away from home for the Stones, and that's where they recorded one of their best albums, Exile on Main Street. But some sneaky stuff happens. Some really shifty stuff happens when they're there. There's a death. Okay, there is a death of this woman, and she was. You guys remember the TV series Medium? You guys remember that Medium with Patricia Arquette? Do you remember the guy that played Patricia Arquette's husband in Medium? Guy, he was got a goatee. I forget his name. Anyway, he was a little kid. He was a little kid that was hanging out at that chateau. Their father was a photographer, and the mother was there as well. And he used to bring Keith Richards. I mean, he talks about, there's a documentary about the movie. I mean, about the making of the album, and he talks about bringing Keith Richards joints and everything. Anyway, his mother dies in that chateau during the recording of Exile on Main Street. And look at Jagger. He's got that Mars-Pluto square. Pluto's in the third house. And that Mars, which we talked about already, hidden enemies squaring off against Pluto. He's got the moon in Taurus, trining Neptune. That's an interesting trine. Not a bad trine, actually. But it's that Mars-Pluto square and that Mars-Mercury square, but that Mars in the 12th house, fixed in Taurus. Anyway, just a little Rolling Stones trivia there for you if you weren't aware of it. But I just wanted to show you. It's really interesting too for somebody who's has Virgo in the midheaven and has Chiron in Virgo, which is the wound of health, right? And Moon in Virgo. Keith Richards is probably one of the least Virgo people you'll ever meet. I mean, in terms of his habits. Who knows? I mean, maybe secretly he's a health freak, and he's been able to, or he's a blood freak, and he's been been drinking blood ever since he got that wonderful transfusion back in the day. Anyway, I wanted to show you this as. Oh yeah, so through Saturn as well too, right? Look at that. They've got Saturn both in Gemini conjunct. Man, they got conjunctions all over the place. No wonder they've been together and hung out together and made music and lived a life of international debauchery. Okay, here we go. But you might enjoy that. I actually like Keith Richards. I bet you he would be, if you could understand half of what he said, I bet you'd be fun to hang out with. I'm not sure I'd want to hang out with Mick Jagger though. Okay. All right, let's do another chart here. Let's see. Okay, this is let me pull this one up. Let's see what we got here. Okay. All right. Okay, this is the chart of Ty Cobb, who is a baseball player, or was a baseball player. And he was sort of the forerunner of Pete Rose. And Ty Cobb was a generally unpleasant human being. And he was kind of well known as a racist. We're talking, a real racist, very open about his race, his views on race. Of course, he played baseball during the 1930s, which was a very, very different time. And even at that time, baseball wasn't integrated. He was from the South. His nickname was the Georgia Peach, and you can see where he was born in Georgia. Anyway, he was a fairly unpleasant human, but he was an amazing baseball player. And he liked to sharpen his spikes so that when he would slide into a player, he would perforate their skin. Of course, they'd feel pretty significant amount of pain. And one of the things that, by the way, of all the signs, Sagittarius is the one that's generally connected to bigotry. And we talked about this before because there's a tendency on the part of Sagittarius to be opinionated, number one, and number two, have a sense that they are able to see the big picture, right? They have a sense that their jurisprudence should go unchallenged. That's the nature of Sagittarius. But they're also potentially very open and, avuncular. It's a very interesting sign, right? It's mutable. So it can move between those spectrums. And you could find that probably in the same person, like, Pete Rose. Well, he's not a Sagittarius. Who'd be a good Sagittarian to kind of pull from? Bill Hicks was a Sagittarius. And, Bill Hicks was complicated. Bill Hicks Bill Hicks went from being a full-blown, like, he did everything. He drank and did drugs, and he smoked. He smoked until he passed away. It's funny, I talked to Bill Hicks's mother one time back in the music business because I was trying to get his comedy recordings, his live recordings for this company I worked for, and they're all the Sacred Cow stuff. And that was Kevin Booth's company. So he had all these recordings of like Bill Hicks and Joe Rogan. This is before anybody knew who Joe Rogan really was. So I actually talked to Bill Hicks's mother. She was lovely. Anyway, so he went from that debauchery that Sagittarius is known for, like, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. And then he dropped it all and he became, a teetotaler, although he smoked up a chimney. And that's because Sagittarius is capable of that. Sagittarius is capable of going to the extreme and to the excess and then boom, punching through the other side and being completely different. So that's kind of an indication of the mutability of it. Now, does that have some level of transformation? Yeah, I think so. But it's about getting through. William Blake, the great Sagittarius, I talked about this 2 weeks ago. He said that the road to excess leads to the palace of wisdom, right? So that's a kind of a Sagittarian trait. Even Jim Morrison had that. So, except as we know, Morrison didn't make it back theoretically, right? We don't know. We don't really know that, to be honest with you. But let's take it at face value. He went to the excess part. He didn't get to the other side. All right. So about Ty Cobb, an interesting story about Ty Cobb is that after he retired, and Ty Cobb became a very wealthy man after his baseball career. And one of the things that Ty Cobb was that Ty Cobb was a Mason. He was a Freemason. Look what he has. He's got Jupiter in the 11th house, the house of groups and associations. So obviously, here we go. It's lining up, right? So he's a Freemason. He's got Jupiter there. And I'm going to bet that he made money through his Masonic connections because he's got the Jupiter sextile to the sun. Right? It's right there. It's right at the beginning of Scorpio. So it is the expansive. Remember, Jupiter's resources. It's resources and other people's money. And it's coming through the 11th house. They also played on a team. So the 11th house is team related as well. But one of the interesting stories about Ty Cobb is that years after he was done playing baseball, he picked up a hitchhiker, and he told the hitchhiker that he killed a man. That he had killed a man, and the hitchhiker thought that was unusual to say the least, and that's part of the lore of Ty Cobb. Well, look at where his Mercury is. It's in the 12th house, which is one of the houses of secrets, right? The 12th house and the 8th house are hidden houses. So people have Mercury in the 12th house and Mercury in the 8th house. They tend to hold secrets, right? So what do we have with Mercury right across from it? Hello, there's Pluto and there's Neptune. And we've got the Mercury-Pluto opposition. And does that represent death? Does that mean that Ty Cobb actually killed somebody and he got away with it, possibly. I mean, you know, he was connected to the Masons. And he's got that Mars opposition to Saturn too, and Saturn's in the 8th house again, the hidden house, secrecy. But he does have this grand trine. He's got that Mars, and let me get that. I think it's a Mars it's in Capricorn. It's towards the end of Capricorn. So he's got Mars in Capricorn at 25, and he's got the Moon in Virgo right at his moon, just like good old Keith Richards. We were born around the same time, the 18th of December. So we're always going to get the Moon in this position, correct? Yeah, right around this. Well, they're close to each other too in terms of ascendants. Also, so we're going to have Moon in Virgo this time. That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. Well, we got Moon in, hold on, the Moon cycle changed because we've got Moon in Gemini. But here we go, both on December 18th, 1886, and in Keith Richards' chart, which is December 18th, 1943, the Moon is in Virgo. So the Moon cycle has shifted. And now we have Moon in Gemini. Interesting. All right. Let's see, Ty Cobb. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. I wanted to bring up the Mercury part with the opposition to Pluto and Neptune. Again, secrecy and death. How about that, right? Neptune, Pluto conjunction, secrecy and death. And Pluto is in Gemini, and Neptune is in Taurus, and that Mercury, of course, is in Sagittarius. So there you go, a little Ty Cobb for you. Interesting character, not a nice guy. Not a nice guy. There are people who think that he should be kicked out of the Hall of Fame, by the way. That's, I bet you they're going to do that with baseball. I bet you they're going to retroactively try to remove people. All right. So let me check in with everybody, see how everybody's doing. Just why don't we see if I can take any questions from y'all. Hey, I got 51 people in there. Let's see what we got. Binge watch Medium last fall on Amazon. Chateau. Water. Does that mean chateau? Let's see what we got here. Yeah, the Stones kick. One of my favorite Stone songs is Monkey Man. Robert, have checked out the show Shut Eye. It's on Hulu. No, I don't have Hulu. I don't. I got rid of Netflix too, by the way. Pretty sure as I see the charts, but tonight I haven't seen one. You haven't seen charts tonight? You guys have not seen charts? Hold on. I've been putting the charts up tonight. I'm not sure why you're not seeing them. I've been attaching them. Let me just see here. What's this? YouTube reconfigured their live stream. They totally reconfigured that. Hi, Gene. Nice to see you, Gene. I haven't seen you in a while. I tried to link to Keith Richards' chart, but YouTube. I don't know why. I don't know why you're not seeing the images. I really don't, because they're showing up on here. Let me try it again, because I haven't been here. Let me try one. Let's do this one. Let's do Kate's here. So I ran across Kate Steinle's chart. This is the woman who was killed in San Francisco. I wanted to kind of do a group thing with you guys tonight with this chart. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not sure why this is happening. Because you can see me, and I'm using OBS, which is what I do all the time. I apologize for you not seeing the charts. That stinks. Let me see if I can do this. I apologize for that. Let me see if I can do this. Let's see if we can. What happens if I put this? No, stay. I want to stay here. Yeah. So YouTube changed their streaming. Let me see what we got here. Hold on a second. It's a whole new interface. So I apologize. Hold on. Okay, really good show. Okay, pop in. Hey, there's Eddie. What's happening, Eddie? Yeah, I don't understand why the images aren't coming up tonight. I got to figure it out. Why don't we do a little, because if I don't have the images, I don't think it's as meaningful for you guys. Total Mercury retrograde, huh? Why don't we do a little Q&A if you want? You guys can ask me questions from the chat room if you like. Be happy to answer them. And why don't we do that now? And maybe I'll shut the chart part down until I figure out what's wrong. So the floor is yours. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm here. I'm here for you. All right. While you're thinking of your questions, here we go. Let's hear the negative aspect, but as sure, there's a lot. I mean, look, Capricorn, it's harder to get. I mean, we're talking about Saturn in Capricorn. Okay. Here's Robin. Okay. They're way back there, Robin. I'll go back. Check it out. Okay. So Capricorn, I actually have a lot of respect for Capricorn. I like Capricorn people. By and large, you generally know where you're coming from with a Capricorn person. I mean, I've always experienced them as, being really honest. And I think Mercury in Capricorn is one of the most underrated aspects of, it's one of the most underrated aspects of the zodiac, or, Mercury, because like Mercury in Capricorn is really, in its own way, visionary, right? That's the nature of Capricorn. It's always forward. So, yeah, the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, by the way. I looked it up. Got to be honest. All that Sagittarius stuff, you got to be honest. Yeah, no, I like Mercury in Capricorn, and even Venus in Capricorn is a little, it's a little frigid, Venus in Capricorn, but once Venus in Capricorn warms up, and it's an earth sign, right? It can be really earthy, and but I like Mercury in Capricorn. I tell this story all the time. One of my best students, and a really just an all-around terrific guy, Ken. He was a librarian for the Cleveland library system, and he was tasked with creating a brand new library for them. And he built a library that was going to be not just functional in a contemporary fashion, but he built a library that was going to be functional 25 to 30 years out. That's the nature of Mercury in Capricorn. Saturn in Capricorn is going to be rough sledding. I'm sorry. It just is. On the personal side, we all get to deal with personal accountability. We get to figure out how we can theoretically, run our own system, or run our own version of the system. I've talked about some level of self-governance, some level of plugging into the system. If you want to, this is a time to do it. If you don't like what's going on locally, get involved with Saturn and Capricorn. I mean, these are sort of the options that are open and available to us, or if you want to create your own system, go create your own system. Go study natural law and figure out how to, deeply immerse yourself in that. Either way, you're taking responsibility for Saturn and Capricorn. That's the nature of it. There are three versions of the Saturn return. I believe this was according to Alan Oken. And there are three versions of the Saturn return. One, you take your Saturn return like medicine. You take it, it's like medicine, and you do whatever it is you're supposed to do. If you're in a corporate job, you have the corporate job, you work hard, you put your best foot forward, and you mature. This is Saturn return number one. Okay, Saturn return number one, between 28 and 30. Okay, that's what you do. And so you leave your childhood, your youth behind, and you grow up. Second version of the Saturn return, number one, is that if you don't stay in the corporate space, what do? You do something on your own. You become an entrepreneur, or whatever that is. But you have to apply the same kind of discipline, same kind of structure, same kind of focus, and the same kind of form as if you were working for somebody else. Because that is the ultimate lesson of the Saturn return. And the third version is you don't do any of them and you fuck it up. And you can't fuck up a Saturn return. Theoretically, it's all grist for the mill, but I think that the whole idea with Saturn is to take advantage of it and to grow, right? So again, if we take that same analogy with the Saturn return and we apply to literally Saturn's return into the sign of Capricorn, you got one of two things, right? You're either going to plug in a way where, hey, look, the world is, pretty screwed up, and at least maybe on a local level, I can do something, I can make a change, or I can become more self-governing and figure out how to do that. But either way, you're still going to have to apply that lesson of Saturn in Capricorn wherever it is in your chart. Wherever it is, you have to go through it, and it's not bad though. I mean, I'm not down on Saturn. I think Saturn is actually a really powerful planet. And it has really great opportunities. It's not always the easiest, but I'm telling you, clear shit up with Saturn. Like if your valves are all clogged and backed up, and you're going through a Saturn transit of the 12th house, you're going to go through it. Whatever it is that for the last 30 years of your life, since the last time Saturn was there, whatever it is that you've held inside, you haven't acknowledged, if you've been in denial, if you've done things that you haven't copped to, whatever those are, if that's part of your path, if that's going on, you've got Saturn going through your 12th house, you've got to deal with some version of that, whatever that is, whatever you haven't lived out over the course of the last 30 years. And Saturn goes through and just starts, blowing out the 12th house. And then guess what? What do you have left? You've got you and Saturn. And you get to deal with the Saturn transit on your. I mean, I really think that if people can take the Saturn transit of the 12th house off, that would be awesome. And not off in a way that would be leisurely, but in a way that you didn't have to deal with everyday life, although sometimes that's part of it too. So Saturn, Saturn and Capricorn, it gets a bad rap in some ways. I agree with you. But there's some very powerful lessons and very powerful medicine around Saturn. You deal, because Saturn is restriction, it is the hypercube. It is the black hypercube. And that's the cage, right? That is the cage. That is the spiritual cage that is prevalent on this planet. That's the representation of Saturn. And, when you get into it, it's limiting. It is limiting, but what happens is that somewhere in that process, somewhere in that journey, you get to go through breaking through those limitations, and often by surrendering to the process and surrendering to where you are, right? Like if you're in hell, it's probably a good idea to at least admit you're in hell. It's a good place to start. And sometimes that's what Saturn will bring us. All right, what else do we have? Let's see. I'm sorry about those visuals. We'll get that going in the hopefully by next week. Eddie says, here's an interesting story about Capricorns in my life. My dad is a Capricorn, January 6th, and my mom, Pisces, March 10. When I moved to Mexico, I realized my roommate, a girl who invited me to join her, shared my dad's birthday and her best friend of my mom's birthday. Interesting. Eddie's a Libra. World events. Yeah, I talked about the world of. Here's what I think Saturn Capricorn is going to bring us. You ready? Strikes. I think we're going to start to see strikes. That's what's going to happen. One of the things I talked about in the Saturn and Capricorn webinar was, we can see like when Saturn is moving from one sign to another, or when the other outer planets are moving from one sign to another, they leave clues. They leave clues in those final degrees of the sign that they're in and what we're going to see. I'll give you two examples, okay? So Harvey Weinstein hired a security, quote unquote, security agency to help him deal with all these women who were popping out of his past. Does anybody, I bet you, I know Eddie knows what this is. I know he knows what it is. The name of the security company is called Black Cube. And so here we go. It's the end of Saturn and Sagittarius. We have Black Cube making this appearance in our consciousness. They're ex and maybe some former or ex and current Mossad members. And so they're helping out, quote unquote, helping. They're basically Harvey Weinstein's cleaners, right? So this is one image. The other image that I saw was that in Oakland, California, what did we have? We had, well, besides the fires, there's a huge strike going on in Oakland. Well, there wasn't any. Well, there was the ghost ship fire, but that was what, about a year and a half ago. Anyway, the whole city's been on strike. So I think we're going to see strikes happening through Saturn and Capricorn. I think people are going to not be happy with either work, or there's going to be shutdowns. I feel like that's going to take place. And I feel like we're going to see shutdowns. I think it's going to start in Europe, by the way, in Western Europe. I think people are just going to be sick of things, and they're just going to stop. And if you want, I always said, if you want to change the world, what you do is you just don't do anything. I mean, I think if we all stayed home for, about 45 or 60 days, it'd be a very interesting scenario, wouldn't it? People doesn't do anything for 60 days. Well, I mean, that would change everything. You wouldn't watch TV, just eat, hang out, be with other people. You wouldn't go to work. I mean, everything just shut down. Just getting 60 days, 45 days worth of food. What would they do? Like, come to your home and pull you out by gunpoint and force you to go to work? Community garden, gather up some Capricorns. Yeah, the community stuff I think is going to be important. I'm not sure Trump makes it through with the Saturn transit through Capricorn. I'm not. He's going to have Saturn opposing all of his Cancer planets, and the Cancer planets are his base. And I think he is going to lose his base. That's my sense. I think his base. Cardinal signs are bossy. Yeah, cardinal signs are bossy. I would agree with that. They do. I was thinking about that today as I was walking down my stairs. I was thinking about cardinal energy and how there is. I mean, even like Libra has a kind of maybe it's a regressive bossiness, but Cancer is also kind of bossy in its own way. So I don't think Trump is going to make it through to the next. I don't think he's going to make this term. I'd be very surprised. Let me put it that way. I'd be very, very surprised. He's got Saturn going through his 5th house. He's going to have problems with his kids. One of his kids might, go through some kind of an indictment. Anything in particular about the astrology for tomorrow? Some big talk on the web. Is something. Well, yeah. We're going to have the new moon in Capricorn. I'm sorry, new moon in Sagittarius conjuncting Saturn. That's right. And then it enters Capricorn. So what is tomorrow? Tomorrow is the 18th, correct? It's 18th. So what in particular, Maria, are people talking about? I'm just curious. What's the heads up around that? Libra, Capricorn, Cardinal night. Yeah, Eddie, you're Libra's the pleasant nightmare. Am I right? Let's look at this. Let's go December 18th. Let's look at December 18th in history. Let's see what we've got. Let's see what we can line up. See if there's anything interesting. TD Ameritrade is launching Bitcoin futures tomorrow. So Bitcoin is going into the futures market tomorrow. How about that? Under a Mercury retrograde. Let's see. Kublai Khan renames his empire Yuan. In the beginning of the Yuan dynasty. That was back in 1271. New Jersey became the 3rd state in the United States in 1787. How about that? The first Thanksgiving was in 1777. And that's when the United States celebrated its first Thanksgiving on December 18th. marking the recent victory by the American rebels over British General John Burgoyne at Saratoga. What else do we have here? The Nutcracker premiered in 1892. And let's see what else. The Battle of Verdun ends. That's where I was born. I was born in Verdun. It ends on December 18th, 1916, when German forces under Chief of Staff Erich von Falkenhayn are defeated by the French and suffer 333,000 casualties. Can you imagine that? I went back to Verdun when I was 40 years old. What was that? 41. I went back when I was 41. And I rented a bike and I rode all over the place. What else do we have? Let's see. Saturn's moon. This is back in 1966. Epimetheus is discovered by astronomer Richard Walker. So we have a Saturnian moon discovered in 1966. What else do we have? Let's see. Other than that, those are the highlights. So I'm not seeing anything in history that really jumps out, of course, except for the war in Verdun. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, I don't know why the images aren't happening. I got to figure that out. Let's see. Zsa Zsa Gabor died. Oh, yeah, good old Zsa Zsa. Good old Zsa Zsa Gabor. Let's see what else. Paula asks. Let's see. You mentioned Hillary. Whatever. Yes. Yeah. Does the ankle bracelet figure in? Well, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it does figure in. Actually, she has Uranus, if I'm not mistaken, in her 8th house, and so that's Uranus in the 8th house is an interesting aspect. It's chaos. It's chaos from the underworld. It's said that people with Uranus in the 8th house can predict their own death. But I think she's got some stuff coming. And I talked about the anklet thing. She's probably, who knows? Maybe with all this Sagittarius and this Mercury retrograde stuff, maybe all this indictment stuff is going to come out. Let's see. Cliff High says CME will shoot self in both feet. And with Bitcoin futures. Yeah, the Bitcoin futures market. Welcome to it. Let's see what else we have here. Hold on. Let me go back. What else is happening? Let's just see here. Yeah, we've got TD Ameritrade, Bitcoin futures, Dash and Litecoin analysis. Let's just check in. What else we have here? Yeah, CME to launch the world's largest futures exchange. That's all happening. It's all happening on a Mercury retrograde as well. There we go. Oh, and Trump supporters are worried about falling victim to a Twitter purge. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe some of this indictment stuff might actually start to come up. And with all this planetary activity in Sagittarius, something has to pop, right? Something's got to pop. Either that or there's a suppression of the pop. It's got to be one of two. So we'll be back tomorrow, though. We'll check it out tomorrow, and we'll be keeping score on the 15 minutes of flame. Any other questions? We got anything else going on? Isn't on the blockchain, settles in fiat USD. That's why it will fail. Look at Paula busting out the blockchain info. What do you think we will face in the first 2-3 months of 2018? In your opinion, what are the most important astrological events to pay attention to? The first things that we're going to, I think that really looking at April and May, I think April and May are going to be huge months. April, we have Chiron going into Aries, and then we have, hi Heather. We have Chiron going into Aries, and Mars is going into Capricorn. Mars is going to be between Capricorn and Aquarius for 6 months in 2018. So we're going to have that Mars-Saturn conjunction during that time. So I think April and May we have Uranus going into Taurus and the beginning of the money change. So I don't know. I feel like we're at this point now where the event cannon is just going to start to fire off. I think we're at a point where we can like barely track now what's going on a daily basis. And I'm sure even Cliff High has had his language sets, kind of messed with in some ways. Like, I think it's harder and harder for him to sort of stay in touch with it. But I would say probably early on in first decan, Saturn and Capricorn, I think we're going to be dealing with real early on, just back, if we look back when Pluto was in Capricorn, and at the end of those final degrees in Pluto and Libra, what did we see? We saw basically the bottom falling out of the economy, right? I mean, that's what happened. And then you had all, the stuff with Bernanke and Paulson, who was apparently there was this rumor that Paulson was dead. He died, and all of a sudden now he's back again. He's got the weird finger and everything. People are looking, I thought this guy died. I mean, it was very strange that whole time, and that's when Pluto is starting to come into Capricorn. So Saturn in Capricorn is going to conjunct Pluto, where Pluto in Capricorn was when we went through this, theoretical reorg, when, the United States bought GM and all that stuff. And there was the rise of the corporocratic state. So, I think there's going to be some of that. We're going to have kind of an echo of 2008, 2009. I mean, that's my feeling, because Saturn's going to be going through Pluto and Capricorn. It's going to be going through that cycle. So we might find that, that there's going to be some challenges around money, and, theoretically, the blockchain is going to, make it a very interesting game for a while. So our Tauruses going through something. All Taurus people in my life seem like completely different people. Somewhat moody. No offense to Taurus here. Well, yeah, I mean, they're going through this Jupiter opposition with Scorpio. So, and then the nodes are squaring Taurus and Mars Jupiter opposition. Yeah. So, well, Mars is fresh to the game, but those node squares that Linda's talking about, those are pretty. Yeah. So yeah, well, I tend to think that the node squares are, on a bit on the minor side, but clearly that Mars opposition to the Sun is going to elicit edginess, super edginess in a lot of Taurus people. And the other thing Taurus likes consistency, and it likes being really grounded and solid. So the Jupiter opposition is going to pull away from their sort of grounded center and base and force them to go into more of a kind of a psychological or even psychosexual space in some ways, where they're not going to feel as safe. They're going to have to encounter, their own internal psychic material. That's my sense. I'm Taurus, but I thought my moodiness was my Scorpio moon. Yeah, Scorpio moons. Yeah, but the thing with the Scorpio moon is that I think there's Scorpio moon is an interesting moon, because I feel like once Scorpio moon people, master jealousy and master possessiveness, and they get on the other side of that, that's an incredibly powerful moon. Really, really powerful. Now, in opposition to the Sun, so you're born on a full moon, right? That's the nature of that. I'm invisible in my retrograde. I wish I was invisible, Madeline. Yeah. Government funding only extended to 12/22, right? No more SNAP or military pay or Social Security. Wow. There we go. 12/18/2010, beginning of Arab Spring revolutions. Yeah. A lot of the Arab Spring revolutions, they actually, I think the majority of them really took flight in February. And I think they call it the Aquarian wave with that. So the government funding, it's right on this. That's right. There we go. So I think we're going to go through, and I wasn't aware of that, Madeline, but because Saturn's going to be going through that same phase where Pluto was in 2008, 2009, that I think we're probably going to have some money problems on the government side. Prince Harry getting married in April or May, I forgot. I think it's probably May, right? Don't they do that stuff in like the May Queen sort of deal? All right. So let's see. I am a Libra rising, charm. Never know what a Libra is truly thinking. This is true. This is really true. Libra's got Aries on the other side of it. So sometimes, that Aries comes whipping through Libra rising, and they can cut you, but they'll cut you with a smile, always. It'll cut you in a very charming way so that they get it and you may not. Okay, we got anything else? Let's see. My birthday falls on the end of the fiscal year, 9/30. Lots of bad stuffs. Eddie, you're going to be just fine. Just create yourself a cartoon reality for the future and step into it. If you don't know, Eddie's a gifted artist, and he's also a really great synchromistic and cryptographer. I want to have Eddie on my show one of these days. We've talked about it before. Maybe the fires will subside as we go into Capricorn. God, wouldn't that be great? Jeez, all this raging fire, right, with the true node in Leo and all the Sagittarius and Uranus and Aries. That'd be nice. These people in California catch a break. I'll tell you what else is really interesting. Russia reformed under the sign of Sagittarius, under the sign of Capricorn. So Saturn is going to start to hit all of Russia's planets. That's going to be fascinating. So maybe Russia, ramps it up as a world power. By the way, I have a friend and a guy who's been on my show. Some of you might know, Robert Bonomo. And I was talking with Robert the other night. And he left Russia. He's got a Russian wife, and he said that that life in Russia right now is brutal. He said if you don't agree with Putin and the party, you'll lose your job. I mean, it's very, it's almost like a replay of communist Russia, although they don't have the communists. It's the Putin party. It's really interesting, and he had to leave. He had to get out. He's in Andorra. So Saturn's going to be coming into, and I think all that's in Russia's fifth house, where all that Capricorn is. So they're going to be going through some growth pains as well. All right, why don't we give it a wrap here tonight? We've been jamming for an hour and 30 minutes. I really apologize about the charts, because normally I have them. They're great to look at. You would have dug Keith Richards and I wanted to get into the Kate Stanley chart. Why don't we do that for next week? Let me just see. That's going to be that's almost Christmas Eve, huh? Boy, that's getting close. So next week, 7 days. It's the 25th, right? It's next Sunday. I don't think we're going to be doing a show. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Hey, look, if you're looking for some last minute shopping, I've got specials over on the website with readings, multiple readings. And, it's there if you want to look for a last minute gift. And I've got, I think it's like 3 for $140. So, we're talking half-hour readings for $40. It's a pretty good introduction to astrology and reading with me and all that good stuff. So listen, everybody, thank you for chiming in and showing up. And I'll see everybody tomorrow on 15 Minutes of Flame. Okay, this is Robert Phoenix and the live stream, and signing off.